Brothers and sisters, what you are about to hear is not a legend. It is not folklore passed down in whispers, nor a story you'll find buried in history books. This is happening now. In the land of fast news and skepticism, something holy has quietly bloomed. A miracle that doesn't ask to be believed, only to be seen. And this time it happened not in a small village in Mexico or the hills of Assisi, but here, in America. Yes, in a hospital just outside St. Louis, Missouri, where one man was running out of time and one young saint may have reached from heaven just in time. This is the story of the newest miracle tied to Blessed Carlo Acutis, and it may just be the final key to his canonization. His name is David, a 42-year-old husband, father, and quiet mechanic who rarely made headlines. He wasn't famous. He didn't have a large following or a big platform, but what he did have was a body falling apart and a soul quietly holding on. It started with fatigue, strange bruises on his arms, trouble catching his breath while working on engines in his garage. At first, he chalked it up to stress, too many hours, not enough rest, but his wife, Elena, wasn't so sure, and so, after weeks of concern, they visited the doctor. One blood test became 3, then came the scans, and finally the diagnosis: acute myeloid leukemia, aggressive, fast, dangerous. The words hit like a punch to the chest. They had 3 children, all under 12. David looked at them from the hospital bed and saw something he wasn't ready to leave behind. Time passed, but not in the way anyone wanted. Chemo was started. Treatments were scheduled. But David's condition worsened. Each week, his strength faded, his skin paled, his weight dropped. His youngest daughter, 6-year-old Lucy, began asking questions no child should ever ask. Is Daddy going to sleep forever? Can God hear me if I talk really quietly? Elena stayed by David's side every night. She'd cradle his hand while nurses adjusted the Roman 4. She tried to smile, but behind that smile was a breaking heart. And then, one night, everything changed. Not because of medicine, not because of any new treatment, but because of a visitor. His name was Father Mark, a local priest and longtime friend of the family. He had baptized Lucy. He had blessed their first home, and on that cold Friday night he came with something unusual. A small silver case. Inside it, a tiny relic of Blessed Carlo Acutis. It wasn't the first relic Father Mark had ever held, but something about this one felt different. He placed it gently on the bedside table, and then he invited them to pray. Now here's the thing, David was never overly devout. He believed, but he struggled with the kind of faith that moves mountains. His wife had a deeper devotion. She had read about Carlo Acutis just months earlier, watched a documentary, even shown it to their kids. Mom, Lucy had said after watching, Carlo looks like a superhero. That stuck with her, because now they needed one. The lights in the hospital room were low. David slept, barely conscious, his breathing slow. Machines beeped softly. Elena sat beside him, holding Lucy in her lap. Father Mark stood at the foot of the bed, holding the relic between his fingers. He began to pray. Blessed Carlo, you once said that the Eucharist was your highway to heaven. We ask you, from that highway, look down upon this room tonight. The words were simple, nothing flashy, just the sound of a priest, a mother, and a child lifting their hope to heaven. Then Lucy spoke. She climbed off her mother's lap, took the relic from Father Mark, and walked to the side of her father's bed. She placed it gently on David's chest, and she said, in the voice of a child too young to know theology but old enough to believe, Carlo, please. My dad's not done being my dad. You were a kid, but you still helped people. Can you help him now? She didn't cry. She just whispered those words, then folded her hands. The room was silent. Then David stirred. Doctors had warned the family the next 48 hours would be critical. They weren't hopeful. The infection in David's blood was spreading. His white cell count had crashed. His oxygen levels were low. But that morning, something unexpected happened. David woke up, fully, not groggy, not confused, but awake, clear, present. Elena gasped when he turned his head and looked at her, not through her, but at her, and said, "Hey, what time is it?" She burst into tears. The nurses rushed in. They checked the monitors. then called in more staff. Then came the tests. Within hours, David was moved for full-body imaging. The doctors wanted to confirm or deny what they thought they were seeing. What they saw: the white blood cell count had stabilized, the infection had vanished, his fever was gone, and the leukemia, the aggressive, fast-moving disease, was no longer visible on the scans. No trace, no tumor, no active cells. The oncologist reviewed the results twice, then a third time, then called for a senior hematologist. They looked at one another across the chart and said the words no doctor ever says lightly: "This is medically unexplainable." A relic, a child's prayer, a quiet priest, and a man who should not have made it through the night. But he did, and now his story is rippling across the country, across parishes, across families, across anyone who still dares to believe that the veil between heaven and earth is thinner than we think. This is just the beginning. David's visit to Assisi and what this miracle means for Carlo Acutis' upcoming canonization. But for now, ask yourself, what would you have prayed if you were in that room? What would you say if God was the only one listening? You don't need perfect words, just a willing heart. David was supposed to be planning his funeral. Instead, he was packing a suitcase. It had only been 3 weeks since the miracle, 3 weeks since the hospital called in a specialist, and he walked into the room stunned by what he saw. The records showed active, aggressive leukemia, but the man before him, healthy, clear-eyed, calm. The story was spreading fast through the parish, through local Catholic circles, and eventually far beyond. Emails started pouring in, calls from Catholic radio, an invitation from a journalist in Rome, and then came something unexpected, a message from Italy, from the very sanctuary where Blessed Carlo Acutis lies in rest. The message was brief, but full of warmth. "We have heard of the healing. If you are able, we would be honored to welcome you to the sanctuary of the Renunciation, where Carlo is venerated. You and your family are in our prayers." Elena read the message aloud, tears in her eyes. David sat silently, staring at the screen. He hadn't spoken much about what happened. He still struggled to explain it, but something inside him stirred. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even gratitude. It was awe at the thought that someone, a teenage saint he'd barely known about, may have knelt in prayer for him from heaven. They didn't wait. Flights were booked. Suitcases were packed. And a month after the healing, the Roberts family, David, Elena, Lucy, and their 2 boys, boarded a plane to Rome. Assisi is not just a city. It is a heartbeat. Every stone seems to hum with prayer. The hills glow in the late afternoon sun, and the silence somehow speaks. When the Roberts family arrived, they were met by a soft-spoken Italian seminarian named Matteo. He had been tasked with welcoming them. "It's not official," he said, "but there's something special happening around your story." He led them down winding streets, past the Basilica of St. Francis, and finally to a small modern church nestled humbly in the heart of the old town, the sanctuary of the Renunciation, where Carlo lies in peace, where so many have come searching for hope. They entered slowly. Each of them moved differently, Lucy skipping a little ahead, the boys quiet, Elena already weeping, and David holding his breath. There, behind a crystal-clear case, lay a teenage boy, dressed in jeans, red hoodie, white sneakers, the look of someone you might see at a bus stop or gaming cafe, not someone you'd expect to become a saint. David approached first. He dropped to his knees. No words, just silence. Then Lucy joined him. Then the others. They prayed, each in their own way. And David whispered, "I don't know how to thank you, but I believe. I believe now more than ever." A priest standing nearby approached quietly and placed a hand on David's shoulder. "You are not the first, but your story is among the most powerful." News of the family's visit didn't stay quiet for long. Within 48 hours, photos were circulating on Catholic blogs. Journalists in Rome reached out, and back in the US the local diocese confirmed that they had opened a preliminary inquiry. But here's the thing, for a miracle to be recognized by the Vatican, it's not about feelings, it's about evidence. about facts. David's doctors were contacted. Medical records were requested. Specialists were consulted. The Vatican's Congregation for the Causes of Saints has strict criteria. The healing must be instantaneous, it must be complete, it must be lasting, and it must be scientifically unexplainable. And David's case was checking every box. Dr. Evelyn Brooks, the oncologist who first diagnosed David, agreed to speak anonymously. I've seen recoveries. I've seen remissions, but this is not either. There was no treatment capable of doing what happened in that time frame. I can't explain it medically, and I won't pretend to. Another physician, Dr. Farid Malik, went further. There's a term we use, spontaneous remission, but that's really a placeholder for we don't know. In this case, it's not just spontaneous. It's coordinated, precise, clean, and it happened after prayer, not after chemo. While the church moves slowly, always cautiously, the people around this miracle have already drawn their own conclusions. One priest put it plainly, if this isn't a miracle, then I don't know what is. The family returned home to banners, balloons, and a packed Sunday Mass. David walked into the church holding Lucy's hand, the same hand that once held a relic on his chest. The parish erupted in applause. Some wept. Some simply stared in reverence. After Mass, the pastor announced, "We will be starting weekly adoration in honor of Blessed Carlo and what God has done through his intercession." A side chapel was dedicated to the teenager in red. Photos of Carlo. A copy of the Eucharistic Miracles website printed and posted on the wall, and in the center, a small wooden stand holding a laminated photo of David, smiling healed. You see, this wasn't just a story about cancer disappearing. It was also about faith reawakening. David had always believed in God, but never like this. He now attends Mass daily. He volunteers with the RCA program. He speaks to youth about Eucharistic devotion, and the relic, the one Father Mark brought that night, now sits in their home, surrounded by candles and flowers. Lucy prays there every night. I talk to Carlo like he's my friend, she says, because I think he is. Now all eyes are on Rome. Carlo Acutis was beatified in 2020 after his first approved miracle in Brazil. He only needs one more confirmed miracle to be canonized a saint, and this healing in Missouri might be it. The church is careful, slow, precise, but as the investigation moves forward, the faithful wait with hope. And many believe that Carlo, the teenager in jeans and a hoodie, is about to become the first millennial saint. From the quiet hallways of a Missouri hospital to the candlelit chapels of Assisi, this story has traveled far. But it's not over. What Carlo's canonization will signal for the church, and how you can begin to walk the road he walked. Because holiness isn't a title, it's a choice. And it begins in the ordinary, just like it did for him. This isn't just a miracle story, it's a wake-up call, because while David's body was healed, countless other hearts were stirred. The miracle wasn't just about a man who didn't die, it was about a world that remembered, yes, God is still moving, yes, the saints are still interceding, yes, the ordinary can still become holy, and it's all happening through a teenage boy in sneakers. When Carlo Acutis died in 2006, he wasn't famous. He wasn't a YouTube star. He didn't trend. But now, he's become the face of a spiritual revolution. Why? Because he didn't complicate things. He said, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." And he meant it. He went to Mass daily, prayed the Rosary, helped the poor, built websites to share Eucharistic miracles. And he did it all quietly. While the world chased attention, Carlo chased God. He once said, "Not me, but God." And now, the world is listening. The church isn't canonizing Carlo just because he was devout. She's canonizing him because he shows us what sainthood looks like today. You don't need to wear robes, or live in a desert, or be a mystic. You can wear hoodies, use the internet, play video games, and still become holy. Carlo didn't escape the world, he transformed it. From his bedroom, with a laptop and a burning love for Jesus, he is proof that sainthood isn't about the past, it's about now. David's healing wasn't just personal, it's prophetic. It came at a time when many feel the church is distant, when belief feels hard, when miracles feel like fairy tales. But then a man is healed in Missouri, with no explanation, no logical reason, and all after a prayer to a teen who died of leukemia. It reminds us God isn't silent. He's just waiting for hearts to listen. And through Carlo, he's speaking again. Since news of this miracle spread, churches have responded. More Eucharistic adoration, more young people returning to confession, more interest in relics, in Mass, in prayer. In parishes across the US, priests are preaching about Carlo. Youth groups are organizing screenings of his story. Parents are placing his prayer cards in their children's rooms. Even non-Catholics have been moved. One Protestant pastor in Missouri said, "This isn't about doctrine. This is about God doing something we can't explain, and I believe it." We often forget the saints are not gone. They are more alive than we are. And Carlo? He's been busy. The miracle in Brazil, the healing in Mexico, the transformation in America, and the countless unconfirmed stories. A girl in India who returned to the church after praying at his tomb. A teenager in Canada healed of depression. A family in Nigeria reunited after years of division. These aren't coincidences. They're ripples from one flame. Carlo's love for Christ is now echoing across continents. Here's what happens next. The Vatican, after thorough review, will present the findings of David's case to medical and theological experts. If the healing is confirmed to meet all criteria, the cause will be advanced to Pope Francis, and then the Holy Father may do what the world has been waiting for, declare Carlo Acutis, a saint of the Universal Church. It could happen in the next year. It could happen at the next World Youth Day. But make no mistake, the momentum is building. The faithful are watching, and heaven is moving. Maybe you're watching this video right now with doubt. Maybe your heart has been numb. Maybe you've given up on prayer, on healing, on hope. But Carlo's life is a whisper. It's not too late. It's not too late to return to God. It's not too late to become holy. It's not too late for you, because miracles are not only about cancer disappearing. Sometimes the greatest miracle is a heart coming home. The Roberts family is now part of Carlo's story, but they'll be the first to tell you they didn't deserve it. They were ordinary, busy, distracted, flawed, but God met them anyway. That's how grace works. Not because we earn it, but because God loves us wildly, relentlessly, freely. And now David spends his days telling anyone who will listen, if God can do this for me, imagine what he can do for you. Let us pray. Blessed Carlo Acutis, you gave your short life completely to God. Help us to see the beauty in holiness, to love the Eucharist like you did, to serve with joy, to live with eternity in mind. Pray for the sick, for the anxious, for those who feel forgotten, for the doubters, for the broken. Intercede for our world so caught up in noise and speed, and remind us of the quiet power of grace. And if it be God's will, bring miracles into the lives of those watching right now. Help us remember that heaven is not far, that sainthood is not distant, and that with every small yes we step closer to the divine. Amen. Don't let this just be a video. Let it be a turning point. Maybe this is the moment you start going back to Mass. Maybe this is the moment you start praying again. Maybe this is the moment you whisper the name Carlo and ask for help. Write your prayer in the comments. Say it out loud, or keep it in your heart, but say it, because Carlo is listening. And more importantly, God is listening. If you've made it to the end, it means something stirred in you. Don't lose that. Share this video. Send it to someone who needs hope. Light a candle, say a prayer, and remember, the same God who healed David, who called Carlo to himself, is calling you too. Heaven is not silent, and the saints are not far. So now it's your turn. Say yes.